Well, seasons of letters here and there, not that of St. Paul. You've seen the one the former president wrote to the incumbent, and now let's look at the one written by the Central Bank of Nigeria Governor Lamido Sanusi to the NNPC. Joining us to look at the alleged corruption in NNPC is Henry Boyo, an economist. Good morning and thanks for joining us. And I'm sure you saw that. Were you wowed by it?
My first reaction was that, is this possible? And then I thought, well, anything is possible in Nigeria. But on closer scrutiny, one should not judge until somebody has been properly investigated, or an agency has been properly investigated and found to be guilty. In other words, central bank governor has how do I say, express his observations. One would wonder why it took so long for these observations to be put on the table, especially since in the letter he claims that this has been happening for years. Why was this condoned for years? I think we should not be hasty here to come down on the NNPC. Apart from the fact that most government departments and agencies are equally guilty of all sorts of malpractices, the issue of 49.8 billion being missing from the NNPC, I think is a bit controversial. Controversial in the sense that I get the feeling that Madam Sanusi probably has not run a business himself. The indication or his expectation is that every farthing that is garnered from the sale of crude oil should automatically be transferred into the Federation account. What we get in the Federation account is supposed to be like what you might call a dividend, okay? When you have a company, the total sales value of the things you sell don't become dividends to the investors who own the company. Because why? Out of that sales revenue, you would need to pay taxes, you would need to take care of your staff remuneration and things like that. You would have also to meet other obligations that are consonant with the operations that you are participating in. So you cannot expect that a total of 49-point-something billion would automatically be transferred, because that is the shortfall between the price of crude oil on the market and how much it was sold for. So we should be very careful. At least the NNPC on their side, I was very impressed that they came up very quickly to say, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about. I'm not saying they're right, but they even went ahead and corrected that it isn't the figure that the CBN gave as the amount of crude oil actually exported was actually wrong by about 4 or 5% or something to that effect. And they said, well, all that amount of money that you're talking about, yes, we accept, and we recognize also, and we are happy that you note we have paid so much. That is what we are supposed to pay. And it is now for us to wait for the NNPC to be able to come up and substantiate that the payments which they said they made to the DPR and they paid to the FRS and things like that are all part of the total sales revenue. So you can't expect the total sales, I don't know what I'm communicating, yes, but you can't expect the total sales revenue to become dividends. I mean, you know, it's not practical.
It definitely does raise questions, though, as to, you know, the knowledge of many people, even at that level, you know, as to the working of other government agencies.
It's sad.
And why it has taken this long. I mean, you raised the question of why it took this long for the CBN governor to make this observation. Don't you think that he might have tried to reach the NNPC to seek clarification as to what exactly was going on with the shortfalls, if they were not meeting his expectations? That is possible, but he hasn't said so.
What I see here are various indictments asking Mr. President to go prosecute because he thinks things have been done. As a citizen of Nigeria, not to talk of an important agency of Nigeria, if you suspect that either the Bureau de Change or oil marketers or oil lifters have domiciliary accounts they're using for all sorts of things. You make a, what might call it, a petition to the police, and you don't seek the permission of Mr. President to say, Mr. President, do you know what these things are, that are happening? Should I prosecute or should I mean, you know, so I think the whole thing, please don't get me wrong. I'm not holding brief for the NNPC, but I'm saying let's be sensible here, okay? You don't expect that someone who is so concerned would be writing a letter to the president asking for permission to, or drawing attention to people. You know the right thing.
What would you have expected?
I would have expected that you make a petition to the police to say, within the banking sector, I noticed that there are movements of capital that appear to be suspicious, especially within this sector of the economy, and I think you should investigate. I wouldn't go ask permission from Mr. President to say, Mr. President, can you pay attention to this? I suggest that you should prosecute, and I think it's a little bit farcical.
No, but you know, I think that one would say we should also consider our environment. We know that what happened in 2009 when he was also going to sack bank MDs. If the report of Olusegun Adeniyi is anything to go by, you do know that before you make certain moves, you have to let the president be aware of what exactly is going on before. Don't you think that would most likely be what he was trying to achieve?
Well, put it this way, Madam Sanusi has not appeared to be one who's ready to, how do I say it, shy from telling the truth, in inverted commas, you know, no matter whose ox is God. So, yes, I can understand that that might be a reservation, but it's not in the character profile of the gentleman we're talking about. So I think that as far as this issue is concerned, we should give the NNPC a chance to come out and defend themselves properly before we start, you know, hammering them with the sledgehammer.
Mr. Boyo, you know that the NNPC has been in this kind of situation too many times. That's what some people will say. I mean, the National Assembly has accused them of not remitting funds as they ought to, dating back years up to 2010. They're either $48 billion missing, $50 billion missing, $18 billion, and now this. Why does the NNPC not seem to be responding when they ought to, giving room for speculations?
I think this is a question you should want to direct to the to the Accountant General and the Auditor General and the Revenue Mobilization Committee and possibly also the FAAC, because you'd wonder why these people have not recognized this huge. These are not minor infractions. These are huge sums of money we're talking about. So we should want to bring in the Accountant General. And, you know, this brings to question the process of budgeting and implementation, because you would expect that there's a stream of income expected and programmed for. And where there's a shortfall, the bells should ring not only on one desk, on several desks. So if this has been on for so long, you wonder. Let me show you something here. This is very interesting. I think the report here is probably even more should be of more interest to Nigerians than superficially it appears to be. We have here a situation where we are told that in 2012, the total income that came to Central Bank was $38.64 billion. Okay, it's there. That's translated into Naira, becomes something like about 6 trillion Naira. You haven't factored in other internally generated taxes. You haven't factored in several other income sources, like dividends or whatever that the government should earn. And you already have almost $40 billion, which translate to 6 trillion Naira. But what was your budget? Your budget was just about 5 trillion Naira. So you had 6 trillion Naira. When you set up a budget of 5 trillion Naira, you haven't accounted for the internally generated revenue. In addition to all that excess or surplus revenue, you actually went out to borrow to cover a deficit. I think we should have a real conference on this issue. You actually went out to borrow because you said you have a deficit. A figure of almost $38 billion translates to about 6 trillion Naira. Your budget is about 5 trillion Naira for 2012.